what is going on in Zambia and served as an ambassador who was chosen by the former president to serve in Germany. How are you doing, Ambassador Mukwita?
Brother Peter, I'm doing good. The good Lord has gotten us into the following year, 2026. Today is February 11th, so I suppose I feel blessed, and I hope you're feeling the same blessed yourself.
All is well, no complaints. My first question to you is, what is this controversy about? Because we were told through the media there was an agreement to allow the former president to be buried. His family went to South Africa to try to bury him. There was an agreement, then reports of disagreement. What is going on, Ambassador Anthony?
Things as they stand are mired into confusion since the death of President Edgar Lungu, the 60th president of Zambia. As you rightly put it in your intro, he breathed his last after complications in Pretoria, South Africa, on June 5, about 8 months ago. Initially, it was understood you need to get a historical perspective. The family made it very clear that they had no problem coming to bring the 60th president's body, or rather remains, to Zambia for a final resting place. However, there was a conditionality. According to the former First Lady, Madam Esther Lungu, and the family lawyer or consigliere, Makebi Lungu, it was an instruction and a last minute wish from the 60th president, Honorable His Excellency Edgar Lungu, that he would be willing to be buried in Zambia. But because of personal differences, personal and political differences he faced, or rather he experienced with his successor, President Hakainde Hichilema, he did not want him to be present, to be anywhere within the vicinity of his funeral. At the beginning, it appeared the office of the president of Zambia, of President Hakainde Hichilema, had agreed to this. You know, the same way, it is not unique to Zambia, Brother Peter, there where you are in the United States. I think you remember such a wish had been made by the McCain family that did not want President Donald Trump to be present at the funeral, and that wish was granted, including several others. So, along the way, after the government of President Hakainde Hichilema had agreed that there would be nowhere on a 10-meter bamboo stick towards the burial of President Edgar Lungu, somehow the program changed. So the family, through the family spokesperson, Makebi Zulu, said, in that case, we are not coming to Zambia because this is a major wish. It is a major cog in the wheel of the final resting of the 60th president. He made it categorically clear that he did not want his political foe to be present. So in that case, we choose to bury in South Africa, where the president's body was domiciled. And the arrangements were proceeded to be made. I think he was going to be buried in Johannesburg. Everything was set. Busloads of Zambians, sympathizers, friends, political allies trekked on a 2,000-kilometer journey by road. Others flew, those that could afford, to South Africa. But alas, the night before the burial could take place, the government of Zambia, through the Attorney General, Muliro Kavesha, took out a swift court action restraining Mrs. Esther Lungu and the family of the 60th president from burying home. And therein lies the dilemma. So from June, the spirit of the president has been hovering between Pretoria and Lusaka in a diplomatic and court limbo. And that's where we are right now, and there seems to be no answer, even 8 months after the death of the 60th president.
Well, some people say that Zambia is regarded as one of the most peaceful country, amiable people, hospitable people on the continent. How come that an agreement cannot be reached to ensure the remains of the former president is laid to rest? Because it is not typical of Zambians to keep, unlike West Africa where remains can last for a year or over a year over dispute in a family. This is quite odd, they argue, and this is tarnishing the important, well-crafted image of Zambia as peace-loving people, and that a simple barrier cannot be, an agreement cannot be reached to ensure the remains of the former president is buried peacefully and that all controversies or sharp disagreements are resolved. What is going on?
I totally agree with you, Brother Peter. Zambia has been known as the last bastion of democracy for a very long time, since the more than 60 years of independence from colonial rule in 1964. We once lived under a one-party rule for 27 years under founding father Kenneth Kaunda. And when the Zambians were tired of one-party rule, they got together within a year from 1989 to 1991. An election was held, the law was changed. Kenneth Kaunda's stay in office was curtailed by a couple of years. And just like that, Zambians found an amicable solution to return to multi-party politics after 27 years of one-party rule. When a president died in office in 2008, President Monawasa, the first president of Zambia to die in office, within 90 days, the solution was found. No blood was shed, and Zambia moved on as if, nothing had really happened. The same thing happened in 2014, on October 28, when the fifth president, His Excellency Michael Sata, breathed his last in London. Again, within 90 days, there was party acrimony, friction, and a lot of verbal fighting. But Zambia, known for its diplomacy that it has always been known of, found an equilibrium. They sat on the table, and within 90 days, we had an election. And it's that election that saw President Edgar Lungu become the 60th president of Zambia. But alas, fast forward, on June 5, the 60th president of Zambia breathes his last. And Zambia has gotten into the naughty boys corner of Africa, where it has never been. Renowned veteran diplomats such as Mr. Vernon Mwanga, who has served in the diplomatic corps to the time he retired from the ages of 18, 19, from New York to Moscow, from London to everywhere else, and to becoming Minister of Foreign Affairs, to becoming editor-in-chief of newspapers, and just a highly accomplished man, was caught on tape about 2 days ago saying that he feels very deeply embarrassed when his international friends and diplomats call him up and say, hey, Zambia, what's happening? Edgar Lungu died 8 months ago. You guys are supposed to be the last bastion of democracy. You hold the best credentials of diplomacy. You re-embody or metamorphosize the principles of diplomacy, as Henry Kissinger put them, that war, Joe is better than war. And yet there is Edgar Lungu, your 60th president. Up to now, you have failed to bury him. So to answer your question, Peter, it is a huge embarrassment. It's a very immense, huge, and painful embarrassment to those that are in the middle, that want to see peace between the government of President Hakainde Hichilema and peace between the aggrieved family and friends of the 60th president of Zambia, especially his widow, Mama Esther Lungu, whose tears have now dried. She has been clad in 90 colors for 8 months. She has cried day in and day out. Her daughter has ended up losing a parliamentary seat because she wanted to remain in South Africa until they finally find closure and have her father's body buried, whichever way it is buried, as long as it is to the conditionalities of the family. So to answer your question in short form, Brother Peter, is this has been the biggest mark and political failure, according to analysts. The failure to hold a simple burial ceremony of a respected leader who at one point traversed the corridors of power, unified the country. Nevertheless, he wasn't a saint. Nobody is. Peter ain't no saint. I ain't no saint. But there is a local saying in our local tribes which says, let me just say it in English. Umuchinshi wachililo kushika, meaning the dignity of a death, the dignity of a death in our African or Zambian tradition lies in the burial. A burial is incomplete. A funeral is incomplete. The mourning is incomplete if that body and that ghost has not been put to rest. And therein lies the dilemma. Regional leaders are wondering. You know, they are diplomacy, they are embedded in diplomacy, so they cannot say. But we understand the South Africans are not happy. We understand the Zimbabweans are not happy. We understand the Ghanaians are not happy. We understand there is a general discontent. We understand there has been calls that have been made to State House to say, look, whatever differences you had, let them slide over. Bury President Edgar Lungu according to his family wishes. Then you can get back to fighting. But for God's sake, bury him so that his widow can find peace. But also, as long as he remains unburied, he fuels divisions between the two parties, those within the government and those outside of the parties, those who are friends of the president and those who are frenemies of the president. So we are praying on February 5, actually, when the Ghanaian president, Dr. Dramani Mahama, who was a personal friend of President Edgar Lungu, visited. We were hoping that maybe in the background, these are some of the issues they could have discussed. But of course, that is diplomacy behind closed doors. We can never know. After he left, we haven't heard anything on whether there is going to be a burial of President Edgar Lungu. What has remained is divisions. What has remained is a lack of showing an ability to carry out a simple exercise, to bury a dead president who is now
I have heard so many reports of the disagreement between the government and the family of the former president. You served with the former president. You were a close confidant. You visited him frequently. You shared meals together, among other things. But why? Because I also heard that a former president in the region was appointed by regional leaders to try to, as a mediator, to try to resolve the controversy and disagreement between the two parties, the government of the day in Lusaka and the former president's family. Why have all these efforts not seen positivity towards resolving this tension in Zambia?
Your guess is as good as mine, Peter. But if I had to use common diplomatic sense, if I had to use common power theories, I would say that the buck stops at the president of Zambia, President Hakainde Hichilema. President Hakainde Hichilema is the bigger guy in the entire scenario here, in the entire, back office politics, in the entire kitchen cabinet. President Hakainde Hichilema, the commander-in-chief of armed forces in Zambia, the elected president by majority Zambians on August 12, 2021, the man who appoints or disappoints the Chief Justice, the man who appoints or disappoints the Attorney General, the man who appoints or disappoints ministers, the Inspector General of Police, and everybody. The power lies in his hands. If he so decided today, he wakes up and says, I am tired of the standoff. I am sorry that we took this long, but after deeper introspection, I have decided as president and a brother that my brother Edgar Lungu has suffered enough. The former first lady has suffered enough. I recuse myself. I respect the family wishes. I shall not be anywhere near the funeral, the same way that Donald Trump was nowhere near the funeral of John McCain and several others in the region and abroad. Please go ahead. And also, as the head of the government, I command my Attorney General to drop this case against the Lungu family in Pretoria. Believe me, Peter, this story would be history. The next day, tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, there would be a military jet from South Africa organized by President Cyril Ramaphosa hovering all over Zambia and landing not far from here at the Zambia Air Force headquarters, delivering the body of President Edgar Lungu to his final resting place. But alas, the president has not decided. I am not one of the president's advisors. I am nowhere close to the corridors of power in Zambia. But my guess is, if there was anybody who had a final say on how this diplomatic and legal limbo ends, the buck stops at President Hakainde Hichilema, the same way that he appoints the Attorney General and disappoints them is the same way like Moses would part the seas with a stick. Would it happen if he said, drop the case, bury Edgar Lungu? The 8 months impasse would end.
So let me ask you this, Ambassador Mukwita. Some people are suggesting, supporters of the UPND are suggesting that since if there's a burial or there's a funeral for the late president in Zambia, there will be a lot of former heads of state and heads of state to come to the country. It is just prudent that as the head of state, duly elected by the people of Zambia, that he should just be present, to present a sense of unity among the people of Zambia, just to say farewell to former President Edgar Lungu in spite of the political differences. What is wrong with that, they argue?
I totally agree with you, but then there is also another dimension. This would not be the first time the president would not be present at a ceremony where there is international dignitaries. There is times when he's been represented by the Minister of Foreign Affairs at the all-important UNGA, which occurs annually in September in the United Nations headquarters in New York. He doesn't always go there. Sometimes half the time, Honorable Molambo Jaime goes and sits with Antonio Guterres and more than 150 heads of states. And he is still regarded as the person who represents the authority of the president. So even in this case, that issue that you bring up has already been navigated, and people have said this would not be the first time it will be happening. I mean, what we have in terms of diplomacy and writings on the wall is borrowed from the West. There were several heads of states, dignitaries at John McCain's funeral, and the White House was represented. It did not take away anything from President Donald Trump. Everybody knows and everybody respects that President Hakainde Hichilema is the bona fide and elected president and commander-in-chief of Zambia, whomsoever he chooses to delegate his authority to represent him at any function carries the same weight as the president. So the detractors have said, no, Mr. President, no advisors of the president. The president has been represented several times by officials such as either the vice president or the minister of home affairs. Nothing is taken away from his authority if he stays away. In fact, just to push the question further, I know you are the one who's doing the interview, but others are asking, and maybe you may give some wild guesses. The question that is coming on the other side is, why is President Hakainde Hichilema insisting so much that he has to be at the funeral of President Hakainde Hichilema, when it is of President Edgar Lungu, when it is a well-known recorded fact that there was no love lost between the two? If anything, they were like oil and water, politically and even personally. They never mixed. In the opposition, President Hakainde Hichilema vowed and kept his vow. He never recognized President Lungu as president. And in turn, according to some mischief along the way, we understand the former president also jailed his friend on political grounds. The president currently does put the number of times he was arrested for at 15. When one BBC journalist asked him, say, how would you describe your relationship with the late President Edgar Lungu? He didn't blink an eyelid. He simply said, he jailed me 15 times. So you can see that the dice was loaded from the start. So the question I ask you and the question others ask is, if there was such bad blood, why then does the all-powerful president of Zambia still want to be present at this small funeral of a man whom he never recognized as president when he was in office? Why does he want to recognize him and give him full honors as president after his death, despite the open rejection by the family? And therein, all sorts of suspicions and speculation arise, which I do not want to go through. I just want to look at what is legally available. I just want to look at what is religiously available. So why? What would you say, my brother, looking at it? Because you are impartial in this matter. If you have to look at this scenario, And somebody had to say, oh, Peter, you know you have interviewed various important people in Zambia. You know the former president, you interviewed him several times. You know the former minister of foreign affairs. You know lots of people. What is your understanding of why President Hakainde Hichilema wants to be within meters of the corpse of the 60th president of Zambia? What would you say, brother?
It's an interesting dynamic going on, but knowing what I know, I think there has to be a solution. But my question to you, Ambassador Mukwita, is before we go here on Africa Things, will this controversy and lack of agreement or sharp disagreement, creating tension, as reports suggest in Zambia, have any impact on the upcoming general election in Zambia?
As a political scholar, as a political student, as an observer on the sidelines, as a student of Zambia, I think the non-barrier of President Edgar Lungu is going to have a huge impact on the outcome of the presidential and general elections that occur in Zambia, where President Hichilema is seeking re-election on August 13. And I'll tell you why. There is one issue which is called in communication science, it's called nostalgia phenomenon. People always have this tendency of having nostalgia, starting from the biblical days to the modern days, to the Napoleonic days. I mean, the children of Egypt, despite being freed by Moses, as they walked, tired and hungry in the desert on the way to Israel, they longed for the Pharaoh's flesh pot. Despite being beaten up, they just wished, Moses, we wish you had just taken us back. Napoleon, being in exile, only made his figure, in France a much bigger guy. And it is my view that these things do not happen in isolation. And I think scientifically in communications, President Edgar Lungu's non-barrier has given him a new aura of martyrdom in Zambian politics. He's been seen, if you talk to some people, as a person punished, unfinished business, a person whom they think was punished during his life and is still being punished in his death. So whoever supports him long for the past, when they probably had more money, when the prices of mini meal were cheaper than they are now, when the fuel prices were cheaper than that. So elections are always about nostalgia and the hope for the future. And as long as there is nostalgia of the better days, the fresh pot days of the pharaohs of Egypt and Napoleonic days, as long as there is the days of dancing of Edgar Lungu, as long as there is a deep belief that President Edgar Lungu has been punished severely by the current administration, I think he will be on the ballot in one way or another. I mean that euphemistically. I don't believe in trying sciences and stuff like that. But I do believe those people that support him will be going with his ghost lingering in them. But the worst part of it all, in my view, Brother Peter, is the unnecessary division the death of one single man has caused to an entire nation that has been known to unite and settle its differences on a round table, like I try to use the Henry Kissinger, phenomenon of Joe is better than war. The deep division, Edgar Lungu has become more alive and probably even more significant and more divisive in death than he was ever in life. And my appeal to the government as they seek re-election is they could get a major coup right now. If I was one of the advisors of President Edgar Lungu, I would say, Mr. President, I was watching Ambassador Anthony Mukwita talking to his colleague Peter Coloti from DC, and they were saying that if you let the family bury President Edgar Lungu without you being present, you could win an extra 100,000 votes. I would do that. But then it appears like bury Edgar Lungu today, you are damned. Don't bury him today, you are still damned. Bottom line is, these divisions were never necessary, and again, the buck stops at one person, the most authoritative person, the most powerful person the man we revere and we fear the most right now, who would part the seas when he gives the word, is President Hakainde Hichilema. Using your platform, I would look into the camera and say, President Hakainde Hichilema, this is your opportunity. You could show that you are better than everybody else and just say, Barry Edgar Lungu, I will not be around. Finito.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mukwita. We hope a solution is found so the former president will be buried in peace, either in Zambia or South Africa, whichever the decision is made by the two parties. So there will be an amicable solution to this bitter, tensed disagreement. We hope Zambians will come together and be unified in saying farewell to the former president. Thank you very much for giving us a bit of your time here on Africa Things, and we hope a solution will be found soon. Thank you very much.